First up, we have Dr. Sally Hammoud. She's an expert on AI in media and also a chief AI officer. Welcome to the GMF stage, Sally. You're welcome. Yeah, please come on up here. We have the very first Austrian to win a Pulitzer Prize. He's also a data journalist and also a programmer. Welcome, Christo Buschek. And then we have two podcasters whose podcasts I really highly want to recommend. First up, we have Nikita Roy. She hosts the podcast called Newsroom Robots. She's going to tell us whether these robots are friendly or not, but she's also an expert on AI. In fact, she's an AI futurist. Welcome to the stage, Nikita Roy. And now to my current true crime obsession. It's a podcast called Kill List. The host of this podcast is here with us, Carl Miller. And just briefly to tell you what this podcast is about, it is about how everyday people like you and I will go to the darknet and contact hitmen so that they kill other people, regular people like you and I, often family members or spouses or ex-partners. But Carl is also the founder of the Center for Analysis of Social Media and also an investigative journalist. So Carl, please join us on the stage. All right, so as we start, I want to first understand the role and the place that AI has in our newsrooms today. Sally, I want to start with you because, of course, you get contacted by media outlets, and when they tell you, Sally, we want to implement AI in our newsroom, what is it that they want exactly?
First of all, they want to have the competitive edge, which is something that we have to look at and observe it very closely. Every media outlet wants to be there in the competition. And this is where the ethical implementation of AI comes handy, where we talk about, okay, what do you need from the AI, first of all? What are the areas that you want to cover? What about your human resources? These are the most important aspect and the most important resource of the organization. And the first thing that we say that AI is not a journalist. It's here to assist you. So yes, it's a matter of transformation. It's a matter of shifting the way we think, and we look at news engineering, if I may say news engineering, because now given looking at the algorithms and looking at how social media is shaping discourses, it's now engineering of the news. And this is where we look at, okay, what types of AI would serve your institution? Yes, everyone is using the mainstream tools. Now we can call them mainstream, but there are other tools that can be used in addition, like that would really help the human factor, which has to remain, and I have to repeat it again, it has to remain at the center of our attention. So the first thing that we say, don't rush for AI tools. Look and assess your structure, assess your process, assess your human resources, your journalists, your editors, and everyone else. Then you have to look at other aspects regarding having, again, the competitive edge in marketing and brand equity, news creation, automation of news collection, news monitoring, etc., etc. So it's a huge world where there are so many functions of AI. So this is where we understand the philosophy behind this news or this news outlet. And this is similar to any other company, because now everyone is rushing to implement AI, and they just, and it happens where I can get calls, hello Sally, how are you? We want to implement AI in our company. And this is very funny, because yes, but it's a whole different story that we have to look at. It's a process. Yeah. And this process...
You delivered good news to, I believe, many journalists here, because you said we always have to have a human being at the center of everything. Christo, I want to move to you now, because you recently talked to DW, and you said you feel trapped on an AI hype train. Tell us more about that.
Actually, I even said, like, I feel like I'm being treated with a stick and a carrot at the moment. I think where this is coming from is just like the narratives that is building around AI. And until now we had these narratives of like, oh, AI is going to kill us, which I think is like a false narrative. And on the other hand, we had this narrative that only with AI can we cure cancer. And the interesting thing about this is that both narratives are coming from the same people, the same organization, the same interests. So this makes me just like very suspicious. Like if I see this, then I'm just like, okay, wait a minute, something is not right here. Like it can't be two things at the same time coming from the same person. So there's an interest behind there. I think like, I think where I'm struggling with is like this exceptionalism around AI that is establishing itself, and everyone is just following this hype and treating it as if it's this like novel new thing. But AI is not nearly as new as the marketing wants us to believe it. Like AI is like an algorithmic system, and we can put it into a tradition and a history of algorithmic system that dates back into the 50s, into the 60s. There are new aspects about it, about like these generative models, but even like the principles behind them were invented in the 60s and not recently. So I think like this is like where I'm coming from a little bit. So I feel like, okay, if this is the case, but there's this hype happening, there's this like, I don't know, this promise like everything will be different, and if, like, I don't know if Bill Gates says like if a media company is not an AI company within 1 to 5 years, and then you disappear otherwise, then I'm a little bit like, but who says this? Like, why is this the case? Like, where is this claim coming from? And so I'm an investigative journalist, and I think like as journalists, like we should meet the world the way that it is, and not the way that we would like it to be, or the way that someone tells us it is. I think that's like our duty as investigative journalists. So then I say like, okay, let's do the same thing with algorithms. Let's do the same thing with AI systems, and look at it. And I think the more I do this, like there's this technical aspect which can be super interesting, and there will be interesting elements coming from it. And we can debate how big these changes on a technological level will be, or if LLMs as a technology is a dead end, which I think is a very valid discussion to have, like looking at everything around it. But primarily, I think at the moment, as it stands, we have to look at AI as a political project, as a cultural project, as a social project, and again, we can put it into a history. It is the same players as like 15 years ago. Like when we talk about AI, we talk about the same people. Like I was recently listening to a talk from Evgeny Morozov, and while listening to it, I figured out, wait a minute, I saw him like 12 years ago. Like I forgot about it. I saw him in Berlin, like, and I realized, because like I noticed he was actually talking about the same people. He mentioned the same names. It was still Mark Zuckerberg. It was still Jeff Bezos. It was the same people we were talking about back then, and we are talking about the same people here. So somewhere along the line, there this idea of exceptional technology, this new thing, this like unique thing, like I don't see it at the moment. I would remain skeptical.
Maybe you should get Nikita's opinion on that. How do you view AI in newsrooms? Is it something that is being hyped? Is it the thing that is going to save journalism? Where do you place it?
I think for me, a lot of the question is not whether AIs are hype or not. Every tech shift brings with it its own hype cycle. The question is what sticks when the dust settles. And with AI, how is it now becoming this new infrastructure, technological infrastructure that we're dealing with? We are already seeing AI helping newsrooms mine public records and break stories with it, helping journalists be able to do their work through all of the transcription, translation tools, that it's now giving them time back, and a lot of ways in which newsrooms right now are prototyping new ways of interacting with their audience. For me, the way in which I look at AI is putting the audience front and center. How is the information ecosystem for our audience going to change in this world? And then kind of working backwards from that, because we are one part of that information ecosystem now. You have social media and content creators, and everybody else is using AI. A lot of what we are dealing with is technology companies controlling the relationship that we have with our audience. We've seen this time and time again. But now, especially everywhere, now Google is coming out with its AI overviews and AI mode, you are seeing news and information coming through this intermediary layer, where my biggest question to newsrooms right now is, if you are having a deal with ChatGPT or not having a deal, and your news is still being consumed by these bots, How will your audience know that it's your information that they're consuming? What happens to your brand when it's being consumed by an AI among multiple different sources and then given to you? There are a lot of huge questions that we need to be asking about the business model of journalism. How can we continue to do the journalism that we want to do and keep our core mission at the center of serving the public? How can AI help us do that better? And I think that's the question we need to really focus on right now.
Mm-hmm. So, Carl, let me put that question to you. How can AI help us do journalism better, especially to you as an investigative journalist?
Well, actually, just to dwell for a moment on the information ecosystem that journalism and indeed everything else is going to be living in, I think that is an important moment to start. And by the way, afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AI panel, the one you've all been waiting for. I think there are two technical realities that we all need to confront. Number one, the material will be produced at infinite volume, which is indistinguishable from anything which is real. Volume, video, picture, whatever. Let's stop trying to teach ourselves how to spot the little glitches in the face thing. That is not future-proofed in any way whatsoever. That's technical reality number one. Technical reality number two is that the audience will increasingly interact with all of that via an LLM anyway. Search is declining. People are not browsing websites as much as they used to. Increasingly, they're having to use LLMs to intermediate with a vast amount of material which is being produced, partly by LLMs. This is the world in which we're going to have to live in. And I think the great irony of this is that people's trust in an age where there is more data than ever before, I think people's horizons, in fact, are going to come hurtling inwards unbelievably quickly. I think people are just going to step away. They're going to turn away from all of this. I think in a world where there is a profusion of unverified content that no one can really tell, I actually think that actually centralizes journalism. Because I think it's voices like DW's, voices like everyone on this stage and everyone in the audience will be that small coterie of people that are actually turned to once again kind of talk about the world and interpret it. I do think, though, and to now get to how journalism can improve, I think the first thing we have to do is actually probably re-understand what being a journalist does mean. I don't think that's being a journalist is a consistent thing. I think one of the things we're probably going to have to do is to step away from just thinking about things in terms of truth and lies, and also understand that our jobs will be to try and help people navigate between what's real and what's synthetic. I think that's a distinction which we've never had to make before, and it's one that we're going to have to make now.
Does the rest of the panel agree? Sally, you want to say something?
I do agree with a lot of things that have been said, but I have to say something that we live in an era, we have surpassed the citizen journalism thing, citizen journalist. Everyone else in this room, outside the room, is not only consuming media, is also reproducing media, be it on social media, and we don't need to go into that because we've digested a lot of things about social media, and we'll get back to it, of course, during the conversation. But speaking of LLMs, when we are consuming those LLMs,
large language models like ChatGPT and Co, as we call it, we are actually reproducing that knowledge. And this is where I totally agree with you. Understanding what journalism is very important. This is where, in the age of AI, human has to stay at the center of our attention, because we have to push, and maybe you might not agree with this, we have to push journalists to produce and to consume AI more responsibly. I'll give you an example. If you put any fact, and given the fake news that have been happening all over the world, which is actually, it's a very important topic to talk about, that as Google did at one day, before it became and it converted into being an advertising agency, now ChatGPT is converging into a search engine. So as you were mentioning, people go into ChatGPT, for example, look for information, recipe, whatever they want to do. And this is where it's important to start putting in information and data that we create, because what is at stake, which I was talking about Google, is the collective memory. So now, very easily, you can go into ChatGPT and say, Dr. Salih Hammoud is the reason behind the financial crisis in Lebanon. Say it over and over again on ChatGPT. It becomes a fact, because people are less
no matter how we are trying till now to educate people on media literacy, and now we're talking about AI literacy, we're still in the early stages. So we need to look at it from the macro and the micro at the same time. We need to push, I believe, journalists to have AI literacy and to spread that literacy to other people as well, because let's put it this way, let's be realistic. These AI companies, the technology company, they are controlling all narratives. And we have a room full of journalists, and we have seen through AI and algorithms, companies like Meta, companies like X, and many others as well, have been censoring content in some countries and for some people during times of crisis and being selective about these algorithms. So this is not a battle of only the tools of AI. It's a matter of protecting our humankind, our human species, our human memory, and also protecting our human integrity. Because yes, technology is powerful. It is embedded, technology is so much embedded in the work of journalism. It has been like this since ever. And yes, not to be very much optimistic, some jobs in the journalism might be hindered by artificial intelligence, like any other careers as well. But this is what we call transformation. This is what we call transformation. But yet we have to say that journalists have a great impact on shifting the discourse that is created by artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Christo, I want to ask you about what Sally just said. She said we journalists need to use AI more, interact with it more, and feed it more. We heard the Director General this morning say that we need a European AI. There's in fact one chatbot, it's called Chat Europe, that was just launched this month, and it is a cooperation between various European news outlets. Is this the kind of thing that we need for our newsrooms?
So I think like it depends on the newsroom, it depends on the story that you're working on. There will be different tools that you require at different times. I think if there's like one approach how we can approach or how we can face this technological world is like through investigation. I think this technological world, being the actors, the artifacts produced in this world, they're like impactful enough that they warrant their own type of investigation. Like we can really put our investigative lens and really look at it like critically and from the vantage point of like we are not looking at AI on its own turf, we move it over to our turf and we evaluate it and we investigate it following our rules. I think that's a very powerful thing, and if we would do this ourselves, we would even better understand like how we could use these tools ourselves. One problem
who's supposed to do that? I know that you do research on how these language models are being trained, the data that is being used, but when you say we need to do that, because not everybody is a data scientist, so how are we supposed to?
Data scientist either, so I don't think you have to be like a data scientist. I think there's a lot of like ways how you can skin the cat here. I think the essential thing about it is like that you start deconstructing these tools. Like you're not like taking over the narratives that are being told, and you find your own narrative that is fitting to these type of tools. So you mentioned already like transcription and translation tools. So this is the one thing that I'm using a lot, like I require it, but I also know in the same moment, the moment I use it, if I would actually build a story on it, if I would like try to make a statement of fact based on any of these outputs, I would have to go back anyway. In the process, I can still work with it. Like it does help me in my investigative process if I look at it as a process itself. But like if I would like build a story, if I would write it into a text, if I like derive another fact from it, like I cannot trust it. Like this is an issue. Whether to use which tools or not, I think the problem with these algorithmic systems, it's like the probabilities behind it, and I think that makes it so hard for us to conceptualize it, and also why like most AI discussions feel like a gut feeling discussions. Like I feel it's great, I feel it's terrible. Like so and it's I think it's just because like these tools are like so unpredictable and unreliable. But so one issue that I see with this is that we apply concepts of error and functioning that we think how humans would work when you apply it to these machines. And there's a problem, like, because an error that a machine makes is a different type of error. Like, it's not comparable to a human error. Errors of a machine are like in scale, they're in masses, they're like based on probabilities, they're based on like unlikely effects that are like not pre-considered, that are derived from data sets in weird constellation, and that can be very different one time when you use it and the other time. So I think like we should probably investigate these tools, we should use some of these tools, but we should also keep in mind that these tools work very different than what we would expect them to. And I think as soon as we can like get to this point, we will also find better use cases, we'll find better ways how to apply it or not apply it. I think we will also figure out that the use cases are probably more narrow and more focused, also especially in, I'm speaking from investigative journalism, like that a lot of the things that we could imagine that these tools could do, we will figure out they won't be able, but we'll find out other things that these tools are good at that we haven't considered at the moment. But I think focus and really looking at it in a narrow way, I think that would help us a lot in this discussion.
Okay, so use cases, you've talked about that. Nikita, what are the most common tools that are being used in newsrooms right now, AI tools?
Yeah, I just want to add to the discussion that's been happening as well. As Christo was saying, it's a probabilistic machine, and something that really helps me distinguish, and one of the main things I always tell anytime I train journalists on AI, when we're interacting with a large language model, it is predicting at its basic sense what the most likely next word is. And I consider that a language machine. What we are all in the business of journalism is knowledge. We are in the business of knowledge. What we are trying to do out there every single day, documenting history as it happens, keeping people to account, all of those things are knowledge, new data, if I talk in technical terms, that we are adding, that these models then extract upon and then build that out. There are two different ways in which we have to start conceptualizing when and where we use these tools. Are we using it for a knowledge task? Are we using it for a language task? Right now, a lot of our audience are going to be using it for a language task where they'll be like, tell me what the news is. That news goes and summarizes knowledge that we provide. So in its core sense, journalism is not going to be destroyed by these large language models. Our business model is at risk. And that's what we have to really rethink right now. And that's why we have to be, I completely agree, we have to be experimenting with AI. We need our journalists to, in fact, I think should be some of the most AI literate people in our society, because we have that responsibility to our audience to be one of the most informed citizens, because this technology is evolving so rapidly. As somebody who is on top of this technology, I have to constantly update what I'm talking about, what I'm teaching, because things are evolving very quickly. Yes. And so at that same time, we need to be able to understand what this technology is doing, inform our audience about it, because right now, it's all tech speak that's out there. I was at a conference in Denmark, and it was a tech conference, and Google had it. Gemini, these big showcase of use Gemini for knowledge. And I went up to them and I was like, how can you say use Gemini for knowledge when you know it hallucinates? And they actually said,
Tell us what hallucination means when we talk about
hallucination is what we're talking about when a large language model just makes up information. Again, because it is a probabilistic machine, when you ask it a question, it just wants to give you an answer. It does not know whether it's right or wrong. It's not giving you false information, like purposely. It just doesn't know that it might be wrong, but it can't tell you that it doesn't know. So hallucination is still a big risk in these models. It is decreasing drastically. It is not the same as what it was back when ChatGPT was launched in November of 2022, but that still exists, right? Yeah. And so all of that is out there, and we need to be educating our audience on it. I'm having people ask me when I say I work in AI, they were like, well, why did it tell me this when it's supposed to be wrong? Like my doctor told me, she was asking something and it told that the person, that pregnancy is a 12-month term, and when she was trying to calculate when somebody's due date was, and Google Gemini just gave that to her, it was 12 months later, and she couldn't understand what hallucinations meant, right? It's impacting every single beat of our industry, and so we need to be very informed about that in that case. And in terms of tools, I think there is a vast breadth of tools that are used, all the way from ChatGPT.
Tell us your top tools, because we also want to be very practical. You know,
Yes.
People that are in the audience want to know, okay, if you say that we need to be experts on AI, what is it that I should be experimenting with?
I think a lot of what experimentation means is like, open these tools, start having conversations, figuring what these things are. Tools that I tend to use a lot I play around between ChatGPT, there is Claude from Anthropic, which is another great model, and Gemini from Google as well. These are the top, I would say, like mainstream models that exist. But I think it's playing around with all of these generative AI tools, figuring out what they're capable of. But apart from that, our industry also needs to talk about something which is open source AI. These are models that are not really hosted on proprietary text servers. So it's not like Google is having all of your data over there with these models. These models are publicly available. You can take them, train them for very specific use cases for your newsroom, train them to be an expert in finding particular instances from data sets, and maybe train them to be in your newsroom's voice and knowledge. It knows everything about that. And then you can start to create that infrastructure for your newsroom. So there are different levels when we talk about, are we talking about product? How do we think about our newsroom's AI tools future? We are talking about an infrastructure layer, a new infrastructure layer that we need to start thinking about and building. Yeah. But for just the regular journalist, go out there and just try these tools, because I often walk into newsrooms and I always start off any training I do with surveys, completely anonymous. How many people have used a tool like ChatGPT? Up until last month, I still walked into a place where it was 40% of the journalists had never tried a tool like ChatGPT. We are scared of these tools. We are worried about the impact that it might have, because we're hearing all of the bad press around it, and so you feel like you need somebody to guide you through that. Just go there and just start having a conversation.
And experiment. I believe that Christo wanted to say something, and Carl as well.
Just very quickly, I just want to point you to one publication in the New York Times from maybe 4 weeks ago, that basically stated OpenAI's newest models are hallucinating more than they did before. They hallucinate in over half the all cases, 48%, I think, and some models up to 70-something%. That's an increase over the previous models of OpenAI, which were around 30-35% of hallucination. So the fact that they constantly get better, this is again a statement that I think we don't necessarily observe. We can probably observe them in some situation, but not as a general statement. At least that's how I understood this publication.
Yeah, I think there's lots of techniques evolving as well in terms of how we reduce hallucination from where we were. And I think that's also what we need to be talking about, what are the new developments that are happening in technology there.
Yeah, thank you, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, they often study hallucination by banging a prompt to GPT, and that's not how any professional using those tools would ever build them. I mean, you prompt design, you combine large language models, which yes, is just statistical, patterns of language, but then you combine that with symbolic logic, and you combine that with other forms of artificial intelligence that actually has taxonomies where it tries to understand the world in a completely different way, and you combine that with retrieval augmented generation, which is often a way of then going back out to the internet, bringing back more information, and the model tries to answer the question by looking at that as it applies that to the underlying model which it has. All of which is to say, they really are. I don't agree with Christo. They're making tremendous progress when it comes to hallucinations, to knowing when they're hallucinating, and also to prompt designing a series of things together to try and get on top of it. But I actually, just to undermine my own point, I actually also think that the use of AI models by journalists to draft stuff is really over-focused. To me, there's the two really other vital ways in which journalists need to start using AI now. One is around constantly and recursively listening and analyzing your audience. I mean, we can understand audiences in ways which we never could. You combine these models with the kinds of social media analytics that we used to be doing 10 years ago. You can know what your audience was worried about this morning. The idea that we don't have agentic systems now, which are kind of beginning to draft stories on the basis of patterns in language that they can hear their audience already talking about, is kind of nuts. Because technically that's already possible. But then the other one it's far more rarefied, and here I completely agree with Christo. Like, we need more journalism about and over AI, about these systems, like how they're trained, yes, but also how they're manipulated. Like, I know there's been a ton of disinformation, information warfare discussion going on today. The next frontier in information warfare is going to be manipulating LLMs. Like, that is going to be where everyone goes. I mean, I just come back from Vancouver, for Web Summit, which has thousands and thousands of startups. And I went there as I said, hey, I'm an investor, tell me about what your company does. And a lot of companies were beginning to do what they call AI SEO, which is basically spinning up hundreds of thousands of websites, carpeting Reddit, trying to reverse engineer how that training works, and then basically trying to create content to get into the LLM's response loops. So, hey, what's the best trainer that people are talking about today? Oh, well, it's insert your brand here. I worry, with all of that, journalism is not going to be not used by LLMs. I'm worried we're not going to be visible enough in these LLMs if we're not using similar systems. Because you take that, which was like casually being done for branded. Let's put that into the hands of the autocrats, and states that we're working for the next decade to think about how to change those models. That's what we've got to be dealing with. And the only way that you can start to disentangle all of that, make sense of it, and write stories about it is by building your own detection systems using very powerful analytics that is capable of coping and making sense of all of that at scale. So that kind of detection work, actually spotting online manipulation, spotting those kinds of efforts, that requires a whole new suite of analytics technologies that journalists need to, if not use, then at the very least understand and deploy.
So there's also a lot of investment that we need to do, we and our newsrooms. I'd like now to involve the audience, so we'll go. Yeah, sure.
Since Nikita,
While
was
you
mentioning.
talk, I'm going to ask them to please show us the QR code with our question, and if somebody could please move the screen to a place where I can see it, because I don't know what time it is.
Yeah. Just to manage to build on what you mentioned, where that journalist and everyone else is kind of building knowledge, and especially journalists. As you said, this is what I meant by the collective memory. Journalists are the ones who are writing history nowadays. And this takes us, let's take a step back and get a little bit out of the LLMs. We know that AI, and this is why we are here, because we have a misconception all over the world that AI is ChatGPT. And this is what we need to break, basically, this misconception. But what's most important to think of, and just allow me to talk about it for a little bit of time, is the data labeling itself. Because I was talking about the censorship, for example.
What do you mean by data labeling?
Yeah, exactly. So when you're working with data, so data is usually a raw material, it doesn't mean anything. So when you're labeling, you are giving it meaning. I'll give an example. Anyone in the room have tried cannibalism? Cannibalism, yes.
Anyone brave?
Yeah? Come on.
It's a topic for your next podcast.
Do I see hands? So basically, data labelers are asked by tech companies to label cannibalism in terms of describing the taste, describing the feeling, describing whatever, and this helps the LLMs, again, to be more elaborative in the hallucination. It's the similar thing like when, during any kind of conflict, when you're labeling people as terrorists when they are just citizens. This is where we need to look a little bit, take a step back. And this is where the responsibility of integrating AI in journalism, it's a must. It's a must. But speaking of this, yes, media agencies, media companies, they have to invest, they have to. And as I began my speech with, they look for the competitive edge. Because any company all over the world, they have a set of agenda, of course. Any company, be it media or not media, they have agenda, they have ideology, and they have the profit on the table. And you can make profit. You still can make profit, but there should be an investment in more transparent, speaking of OpenAI, because till now we're not able to win the game with these companies, because look at how intertwined with politics it is.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, very important for journalists when they are using any kind of AI tool, again, outside the LLMs. We should look and examine the data labeling itself. It's a lot of work,
yeah,
but We have a long way.
You've given
also
me
to
the
do.
keyword transparency. Just for our audience, please, you are allowed to start answering that question. What should a universal code of ethics for AI in newsrooms contain? Because that is what I want to spend the last minutes on, to talk about ethics particularly. We've already touched upon that, of course, in many answers that you've given. But Christo, what do you believe are the important questions that we need to answer right now when it comes to AI and ethics? At DW, for example, we have an AI guideline, we have AI officers. What do we need in these kind of guidelines?
Difficult
Or what are the
question.
questions that we need to address at the moment? Maybe let's not create a whole guideline, but what are the questions that we need to address?
So maybe like I reframe the question so that it's easier for me to answer. So I look into another field like law. So there's this interesting thing. It's a website that I'm following religiously. It collects like all the court cases where lawyers introduce case laws into court cases, where they make up the case law because they use an AI system. So they introduce like precedents into court documents and say like, I'm creating this argument based on these precedents, and so here's the court case. So this is happening quite a lot. I think the website is collecting like a few hundred cases at the moment. I was reading a decision of a judge just like last week, and basically 11 of the 14 precedents cases in this court filing were made up and didn't exist. So the thing is, like in court, this is like very easy to trace, and I'm pretty sure that like in journalism, this is already happening, and we know some high-profile cases. I'm just want to remind like Chicago Sun-Times, but I'm pretty sure this is happening more and more, and we are just waiting for like a big catastrophe to happen. Like something big will happen at some point before we start to take this serious. So I think if there's like one code of ethics that I want to put in, given the situation, like where I think we're heading is like that we have to be very, very careful. I think like also like, because we spoke about like introducing disinformation into the chatbots, this is something that's already happening. News got reported on it. We know that this is happening also like in Ukraine. I spoke yesterday to a colleague from Ukraine who was telling us about this. It's a technique called data poisoning. I know it in this term. News got called it LLM grooming. We have a lot of terms here. But like, so this is something happening. So when we use these tools ourselves, like you're right, like we might get invisible in these chatbots. But actually, like I wonder, like, are we repeating the things that we are learning there? And I think this is like where I would watch out. Like when we start taking over this information, we run a very high risk. I think this is the risk. The hallucination is, for me, not the risk per se, because it's a technological, inherent thing of the technology, but it's us just taking it over and replicating it. This is the real risk here. And if we do it as journalists, that's like, that's very dangerous. Like we can lose trust with our readers. Like, because I agree with you, like we put our readers first, but it also means like that we don't disguise what we are doing, how we progress, what our process is, where we get information. Like if I take like a good newspaper, there might be errors in there, but I know there's a process that aims for quality, that aims for an excellence. And this is the important thing. And when we cannot describe our process anymore, and we cannot describe how we derive to a point, to a story, to an insight, this is where the danger lies, I think. So this is the one thing that I would really watch out for.
Yeah, thank you. Nikita.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, I think it's transparency among everyone and just us within our organization as to how we are thinking about AI and how we are using AI. Even though we have all of these code of ethics, one concern I'm having is how much is it actually being followed upon on an individual basis within newsrooms? AI is a taboo still within most newsrooms that I work with. The journalists are maybe sometimes using AI. Also, different generations within the newsroom are using AI differently. And we need to be able to have open conversations just within our newsroom on what we are doing, how we are using AI, and that starts out with being transparent and being transparent with our audience in terms of how we are using AI, why we are using AI if we are. And one of the next big thing, I like The Guardian has these, and a lot of newsrooms have these like principles for AI use, and it is making sure that it is purposeful use and not like replacing a human in a sense. Why are we using AI? Any question about why? If starting with AI, it has to start with like, what is the use case in the first place? Why do we have to use that? And then moving into much more deeper how we can use that.
All right, now we still have 2.5 minutes left. And one question I really want to ask, Sal, you said we're not going to lose our jobs. Carl, maybe I should maybe I should put that question to you because I know that that is something that is on many people's minds, whether AI is gonna disrupt journalism in such a way that many people will find themselves out of a job. If we talk about, for example, tasks that are already being taken over, like transcription, which used to take maybe a whole day for you to transcribe an audio or a video, what do you see in the future?
Oh, and I prepared a whole lovely answer on the ethics.
Okay, do ethics and then give us a short answer about the safety of our jobs.
Because it's a real bugbear of mine, so I was actually really looking forward to ending on the ethics point. Just very quickly on ethics, I'm generally not really concerned that people like DW will use AI in an unethical way. I don't think they will. And in fact, actually, we've got a profusion of frameworks. There's one local government in the UK that has 8 separate and overlapping AI ethical frameworks currently in use. They're scratching their heads which of these takes precedence. My big problem is in whether we can generally regulate in a way that has any teeth whatsoever in stopping bad actors or really just generally people from using AI in very harmful ways. And the big hole in the bow of the mighty ship EU AI Act, to me, is open source. There is a big race happening in AI where a whole series of anti-incumbent providers are betting that they can develop faster by open sourcing their models. OpenAI, the early movers, they're proprietary, and this whole new group is saying, look, if we get hundreds of different developers around the world to all work on this together, we can actually build something faster than they can, we can get better faster than they can. The problem with that is, how do you regulate an open source model? There aren't 3 foundational models anymore, there are hundreds, and some of them you can run on your own laptop. Literally you can. Some of these models are reasonably small. And there's no way that I can really see that you can meaningfully control, as a government or a supranational body, the use of a model which someone can take off a server, put it somewhere else, get rid of the fine-tuning on it, retrain it if they want to, and basically run it as they wish. So that, unfortunately, to me, means that regulation cannot be our comfort blanket. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to stop bad actors. And I don't think it's going to stop anything, the kind of availability to AI models that will be willing to do the things that bad actors want them to do.
And I think, I totally agree with you. I think this is why, similar to media, where we were not able to control how people consume media or produce media, we tried a lot through media literacy. I think it's the same. It's AI literacy. We have to keep trying. We have to keep regulating as much as possible. But pre-regulations, there are the ethics, which we need to explain to people as well. This is where, the education comes handy for everyone. And then we have to understand that AI is an ecosystem. It's so much interconnected with many other things. So if we're talking about regulating AI, not only in information production, for example, let's say, AI is causing disruption in the marketplace. It's causing a lot of unemployment versus a lot of opportunity, but I'm not getting there. So what can be done, for example? Some regulations that each company, if you want to replace your people, you have a quota every year. You cannot just throw people and then you disrupt the whole economy. That's a thing that is not much controversial. What is more controversial is about the uses of AI in journalism, which also the first step is educating people about it, because I don't think any of the people in the room, I believe many have children, and your children use ChatGPT, for example, because I teach at university, and I gave up. But how I gave up is I tell my students, you want to use ChatGPT, use it. You don't want to use it, it's up to you. When they come to class, in the class, instantly, I tell them, now, you have to counter-argue ChatGPT, no matter what you believe in. This is one way of building the critical thinking. So we have also to be experimental.
Media literacy, the mayor of Bonn is here. She's watching, she's waiting for her turn. So we're gonna end it on media literacy and critical thinking. Thank you so much, dear panel. I believe that we have seen that this is a broader discussion, and we'll continue talking during the reception this evening, and also tomorrow. You guys will be around. Thank you very much. This is your applause. Thank you. Thank you.